In this week's roundup, Bayern and RB Leipzig show why they're title contenders. Madrid show off their muscle, and Spurs-Liverpool duel turns chaotic at White Hart Lane. Plus, Serie A looks to be a true two-horse race. We recap the midweek matches and preview some Champions League matchups with Daniel's best bets. Full-time roundup starts right now. Welcome into this week's full-time roundup. Matt Gesson here alongside Daniel Brackett as always. Daniel, where do we start? So much action. But first, are you recovered from your weekend? I know we were together on Saturday, and you were already feeling pretty low from a result that we'll get to here shortly. But then, of course, there were some other results that don't necessarily pertain to the pod. But how are you doing? Because, again, it was a rough weekend for you from a results standpoint.
Honestly, Matt, I'm in purgatory. Don't know what I did to deserve this. All my teams for all leagues and sports, every single one of them lost, 0-3. Some in dramatic fashion, some just angering results here. So I'm glad to have a beautiful day on a Monday out here at Noda Company Store, a drink in my hand, drinking the Spirit, what does this say?
Spirit of Radio Kolsch.
It's pretty damn good. Vibes are good here now, and it's a new week, a new page, and clean slate here.
Well, you did mention some terrible results for you, although you are strong in your kit today. I will give you credit for that coming out. Still repping the squad. So, as always, what are we starting with and what are we wearing today?
So I'm wearing the second kit from the inaugural season of Charlotte FC, the Mint City kit, if you will. It's the black with the mint green. Probably my favorite kit.
Gorgeous kit.
Of
Definitely
Charlotte
gorgeous
FC. Kit. Leicester, it was so good Leicester copied it last year, if you saw that. So I love it. Got 22 Charlotte on the back for the year we started. I thought that was better than a player at that moment. But how about you?
No kit for me today. Starting to run out of kits, but there will be more coming, so don't worry about that. I am wearing in honor of Chelsea playing today, I'm wearing the Pride of London shirt, which has the Chelsea crest on it. Of course, it was a West London derby today. Got the W, which we'll get into here shortly, but a few other games I want to cover first. Of course, Daniel, like I mentioned, a really busy week. Midweek in a couple of leagues was on pause as there were some cup games, EFL Cup and German Polka Cup. So we'll cover those first. And then, of course, as always, we'll dive into the domestic leagues. And then, again, Daniel on fire with his bets, and we'll cover those later on as well. But, again, want to start off with the cup reviews. Like I said, one of the best times of watching football is all the midweek games, all the cups, whether that's Champions League or EFL Cup or Carabao Cup or FA Cup or whatever cup you want to add, for the cup. And so Chelsea, as I mentioned, played today, but they also played against Brighton. Seems to be starting a trend there. We got that W, 1-0 win against Brighton, and we've rolled into a back-to-back wins. But that win was a big turning point for us. Not sure, how much of that game really kind of played in. We looked shaky. A couple chances for Robert Sanchez to really give Brighton a 1 or 2 goal lead early, and we weathered the storm. Get a late goal or a goal from Nico Jackson, which was huge. And like I said, a 1-0 win and advance to play arguably a soft team in Blackburn, which will help us as well continue that momentum. You guys had a different type of game, but still a result nonetheless.
It was a good win, scrappy. Leicester go down off a counterattack, off a free kick, and get one early at Anfield. And I was kind of just thinking to myself, is this really going to happen again, where we concede a first goal and then win 3-1, and the exact thing happened. Good to respond. We were pretty much even on goal tally with other teams in the first half, but have outscored basically everyone by an outstanding margin in the second. It seems like we're a second half team, and I hope we buck that trend soon, just because it's going to hurt us at some point badly. But hey, we won. Can't really complain. We got a good draw.
It was a tricky game too. I mean, Leicester are good. They're best championship team. Yeah. They were a Premier League team last season. Some really good players.
They didn't lose anybody.
No, and so good squad and a good 3-1 win, like you mentioned. Another tricky game. That was probably the matchup of the round, I would say, Daniel. Yeah. Newcastle versus City. We'll get to City later on here as well, but Newcastle get a massive win, advance and knock out City. The discussion of the quad is no longer in discussion, and a trophy that City have not won in within this run that they've been on the last couple seasons.
Technically, a quad is still possible.
Just not for City, for Newcastle.
With Champions League, right? Wouldn't that be FA Cup?
No, they're out. The only team that can do it is
right.
Newcastle.
Right.
There is a quad. There is still a quad. It is Newcastle, though. Surprisingly, correct.
Won't happen. Excuse me on that. But yeah, no. I mean, every time City lose, I'm happy. Happened to be twice this week, so that's an even better week for both of us. Actually, just gonna harp on it now. Danny Brams did ask, what is your celebration when City lose? And my answer for that is the Klopp air punch. I usually do that when City lose or get scored on. How about you, Matt?
I just kind of clap to the gods and hope that this continues.
Say a
blessing, and say, okay, let's hope it continues. But a loss and surprising one. We'll get into. You already kind of alluded to some more drop points for them, which is again a strange week, but it is what it is for City, and a team that seems to be kind of up and down. Daniel is Everton. They get a win over Villa, knockout Villa, convincing win. So that's 2 on the trot for them, yeah. And then an interesting game that we'll get into. We're not trying to preview too much here on the show. There's a lot going on this week, but an interesting game against Villa. And advance, yeah.
I didn't see that one coming, but it is the cup, and usually crazy results do happen. So, I mean, any results not that surprising, but that was probably the one that took me by surprise. Other than Wolves losing to Ipswich, especially they went up 2-0, and Ipswich scored 3 goals in answer. Just more pain for Wolves, but they were able to bounce back, like you said. Now, kind of quickly rapid fire here: Arsenal, United, Burnley, West Ham, all the favorite teams won, mostly comfortable for the most part.
And I will say it does, and I do have a question for you now, because of course City going out, it's a wide open tournament, right?
It is, yeah.
Of course you would assume Arsenal probably the favorite, right? Maybe Newcastle, but who, is there any team that stands out to you that would be that favorite? Of course, like I said, City going out kind of makes this thing wide open at this point.
Yeah, well, it definitely helps. I mean, obviously my natural reaction is Liverpool has a chance here, but I don't know if Klopp has a past of just throwing out the kids at the end if the fixture congestion stacks up here, and I think Arsenal would probably do the same. So, and if United gets bounced early, they could be a low-key run.
And they have Newcastle next, which is a tough matchup for them too.
If they leapfrog Newcastle, who's the second probably favored out of that. It's kind of wide open, though. I would love to see a championship or lower squad kind of compete here. We saw one get to the semis last year, so it's always cool with the cup to see kind of the David vs. Goliath scenario. So that'd be really cool just to root for some team to kind of go far in it. But as we rotate to who's your favorite? Sorry.
Of course, Chelsea, naturally, right? Of course, they're on the win. Yeah. No, but I would have to put you guys up there, and probably Arsenal.
Well, you guys don't have any.
No, this is our real thing. Yeah, theoretically, this is kind of you're seeing in real time right now what the wear and tear of some of these teams having so many cups and so many tournaments and competitions going on. So it is nice to have only this to focus on from our perspective. It all depends on the draw. Again, we got Blackburn. That could change in the next round, but a good draw for us as opposed to a team like Newcastle getting United and you guys having West Ham, I believe. So, tough schedule. But like I mentioned, transitioning quickly over to the German Polka Cup, 2 teams that were not upset by lower division teams. And of course, we kind of expected that. Lower Bundesliga, lower German football is not as strong as, say, the championship, although they may beg to differ. Bayern win. I think 4-0 against a very lowly, I can't even remember the team that they played, a 5th division team, I think it was. So 4-0, move on. And only thing coming out of that is Serge Gnabry getting an injury, looked to be a broken arm or some type of injury. Yeah, so it's tough. And you didn't see him on the weekend, so you kind of hope that it's a quick injury and something that he can maybe put a hard cast on and play through. But otherwise, pretty ho-hum. Leipzig also get a win and kind of favorites advance. Gritty win.
It was against Wehen Wiesbaden. My mom was born in Germany, but she would not be proud of that pronunciation. But yeah, no, I mean, Leipzig were always controlling this match, and the last 10 minutes I was watching it were very sketchy. Like I was thinking to myself, this actually might happen here for them. I think they're in the second league of the Bundesliga. I don't fact check me on that. I'm checking right now. Yeah, they are. They are. So they're pretty low though in the second Bundesliga. So they almost had that upset. Good to see though. Interesting games. Bayern looked like they were partying the day before. Didn't really look up to the match.
It is Oktoberfest.
Yeah,
so,
it was Oktoberfest. They could have put probably 15 past them, but yeah, I mean, not really. Just another game. Tired legs probably, as they played this weekend. But yeah, as we rotate to the Premier League, the title race heats up here. So, what game do you want to go over first?
I think we have to talk about the big one, right? I mean, the one that set the bill on Saturday afternoon. Of course, we are talking about Spurs and Liverpool at White Hart Lane, the primetime 3 p.m. game in England, 3:30 game, 12:30 here. I know we were watching that together along with our buddy John Hayes. So, battle of Liverpool and Spurs fans. I was neutral and got to watch you two going at it. It was pretty cordial, not gonna lie. It was a little bit cordial than I thought it would be, but man, what a game, and some big decisions here in this match that ultimately changed the game. Love to hear your thoughts first, of course, being the driver of this one with your fandom towards Liverpool.
Yeah, well, this game was one of the most frustrating games I think I've ever watched, honestly, in my Liverpool career here. So you got the match is pretty wide open. I actually turned to John. I'm like, this could be a Premier League classic game, like 4-3 thriller, like goals galore. Just it really looked great. And then Curtis Jones goes in hard for a challenge. If you freeze frame it when he's touching the ball, it looks fine. And then his follow through just happened to kind of unluckily roll over the ball. If you play soccer, you'll understand this is not a malicious intent. Now, you can go back and forth if that's a red card or not. If you freeze frame, 1,000% it's a red card. But if you understand, where else was he going to put his foot? That's what I struggle with. But let's just move on from the red card, the first red card. And so, Spurs answer with a Son goal. And Liverpool actually are looking great with 10 men. I actually turned to my buddy James, who was also with us, and I said, this could be another Newcastle result here. Smash and grab 3 points. Diaz goes and scores a wonder goal that's called offsides. We got fucked here. Sorry, parents, for the poor language here, but
there is an explicit on the next to the name of her. So.
I wish PGMOL took me to dinner before they did that to me. They didn't even draw the lines. Apparently, it was a miscommunication, and the VAR thought they actually called it a goal, not offside. So complete miscommunication. How can you let that stand? It's literally ridiculous. Especially what hurts worse is when City happen to drop points. That's what hurts the worst about this all. It goes worse for us. The goal gets called offsides. Gakpo actually levels it, gets hurt, another dagger, and then Jota gets a stupid yellow on a soft foul against Udogie. Udogie actually signals for the yellow card, which is actually yellow cardable offense these days. And then Jota obviously can't defend the second challenge. Horrible, brash slide tackle. Another red card. I'm looking at Klopp's era with red cards is very little red cards. And we had 2 alone in this game. That's, I think, our 4th or 5th this season. Some very weird numbers here when it comes to this season. It's been weird. So I feel like robbed of just like, I went out with everybody. I was expecting a good match, and just to kind of play 9 men down really sucked. Kind of sucked the life out of the match, but I got to give it to the boys. They played their hearts out there, and I mean, it was all the way up 0 or 1-1 until the 95th minute when Joel Matip own goal, which is
it was great own goal though. If you're talking about own goals,
so
it was a great game. You mentioned the first 20 minutes or so back and forth. I think to your point, had this been 11v11, it would have been a game for the ages. Both teams attacking. You could see what they were trying to do. Of course, I think everyone's talked about how Spurs have changed their style, become more offensive and open at the back, and you guys love that counterattack.
Exactly,
and so you could see kind of that this game was going to be having that moment, and then that red card completely changes the game. First the red card, and then almost immediately after the goal, that's, PGMOL comes out and says apologies, it's a human error. That's, we're getting to the point now where That's multiple times this has happened over the course of a couple of seasons. I think they really need to take a look in the mirror and see what they're doing. I've gone on rants about VAR, and we certainly can go further into it. But just a weird one, completely changes the game, and Spurs get the win, like you mentioned on that last minute Matip own goal. You also mentioned kind of the bounce and what it would have done if having City drop points. Spurs now up to second, tied with Arsenal after their easy win against Bournemouth. City, though, still remain atop the table, Daniel. It's a weird one because they haven't looked good the last couple of games. We talked about their loss against Newcastle, and now they lose to Wolves of all teams.
Yeah. The Korean guy.
The Korean Chan comes in and scores the game winner. Nice finish. Selfish pass from Cunha, and finds him open and puts it in. And how important, we've talked about this before, that red card from Rodri and how different they've looked. I think that first goal from Neto, Rodri would come over there and kind of either diffuse the situation or at least push that ball out of bounds or change the dynamic there. So are we really starting to see the impact of Rodri being out, and have Wolves found a style of how you attack City and maybe make a model for the rest of the team? Yeah.
Blueprint, if you will. Yeah, no. I was thinking this would be a gritty City win, but I did not expect. They had that amazing equalizer, and I thought, okay, City's in the driver's seat here.
What a free kick, by the way.
It was. We know what's going to happen here, and it's just, Gary O'Neill's done a good job. He's been pretty unlucky, I feel like, at Wolves for the most part, and I mean that was huge result for Wolves in the relegation race here, and maybe that is a blueprint. But I also think there are holes in the City team, and it's going to be very interesting next week as they play Leipzig and then Arsenal back to back with off 2 losses here. It's going to be really interesting to see if they drop more points, and I know that if Pep already had hair, he'd probably be losing it right about now, scratching his head to figure out a solution here.
Yeah, interesting times in Manchester. You would not think that would be the case for at least the team. The blue side of Manchester, of course. The red side of Manchester has just been in complete shambles. They do get the win midweek against Crystal Palace. Unfortunately, have to play Crystal Palace again. A lot of discussion about Crystal Palace putting out a lesser squad in the cup and then having their arguably their A squad on the weekend. Get the points, meet Manchester United 1-0. Daniel, what is going on in Manchester? The Blues came running down again. This is the worst start in Manchester United history, 34 years in the Premier League. So 34 years, and this is their worst start.
Did not know that.
And the Blues were coming down at the end of the game again for the second week in a row.
Yeah, it's the Boo Boys are always tough, and it's hard because you want to back your team, but when the product's not there. But we got to also remember that this team is injured for the most part a lot. It's a crisis at this point, and they're playing 2 games a week with this crisis. So I think that they're not going to react harshly and sack Ten Hag now. I think that you have to evaluate him when the squad's healthy. But I did see Crystal Palace getting a result at some point this week, one of the games, and they just prioritize the Premier League, which is surprising for a team like Crystal Palace. You're probably not going to get relegated, so you might as well go for the cup, and they did the exact opposite of what I thought they'd do. I'm not really worried that much about United. I think that they'll be okay, but if they want European football, they need to react soon. Yeah,
and you mentioned, of course, Erik Ten Hag probably safe. I think the fans have bigger problems with the ownership, and the boos may have been for that. I think you'll start to see some more animosity towards the ownership that's been ongoing for years now, it feels like. And we thought there was going to be a solve at the end of this debate with the team up for sale from the Glazers. They've reneged that possibility of selling the team, so that's an interesting one to look out for. You mentioned the injuries. Having a Rambat on the left, at left back, it's a strange position.
Gross.
He's a right-footed player too, so you're putting him on his opposite side in a position he's not really comfortable with.
Player right there.
Yep, and you mentioned Lissandro Martinez out, and so you have Harry Maguire that comes in, but then oddly enough, Ten Hag puts him up top as a center forward, and just things were very strange with the way
he has a big head, though.
He does have a big head, so you never know what could have happened there. Slab head, as they call them, and he's notorious for putting balls in the net, just not his own, or putting him in his own. So interesting times there, of course. They're sitting currently in 10th, the team that, look out, Daniel. Look out now. Up to 11th after our victory today is Chelsea. They got a big 3 points against Fulham, scoring 2 goals. I mentioned the win against Brighton, so now that's 3 goals in 2 games. Who is this Chelsea? I don't quite know. I'm excited by it. I was texting a couple of my friends during the game. I was a little giddy. I was like, this is what we're looking for. To be fair, though, and we've talked about this, we saw this coming a little bit, right? The games have been predominantly dominated by Chelsea. They just haven't put the ball in the net. Today they put 2 in, and you get 3 points. I think you're starting to see the momentum. You're starting to see how Poach wants the team to play. A lot of youngsters again. Armando Broja gets in and gets a goal. Mudryk gets a goal. Starting to see the ball go in the net, which is a great feeling. And we have Burnley and then a couple really difficult games to come.
Do you roll with Broja?
If he's healthy, he did come off, and you hope it's a small knock. Can this guy stay healthy? That's the really big question. He's been hurt his whole career.
Good at Southampton.
He really was. And he was really good today, too. But that knock, and of course, the game's coming fast. We play Saturday, so we'll see. Hopefully he's healthy, but this is what we look for from Chelsea.
Let's reevaluate after Burnley. If you win Burnley and put 3 results together,
yep.
then Poch needed a result here really badly.
Yes.
And so it's good to see that Chelsea are finally responding, and we were buying beer today, and Matt was singing the song very happy, and I haven't seen him like that in 6 weeks now. So
winning cures a lot of things, Daniel. Winning cures. So. A team that hasn't won, though, is Brighton. We mentioned that Chelsea took them out in the Cup, and then, of course, you would expect a bounce back against Villa. And I was late to the party on Saturday. I was a little bit sleeping in, and I got some texts from you. Like, I couldn't believe this happened. And 6 from Villa. 6.
Yeah. Brighton are stumbling right now, and I think the fixture congestion they're not used to, and Deserby's going to have to answer a lot of questions, because before 2 weeks ago he was getting, maybe he's right for Chelsea, maybe he's right for this job and that job, and you gotta be able to rotate your squad, and they do have a few injuries like Gross and Milner, some of the senior players in that dressing room, and so it's going to be interesting how he kind of navigates this, especially with a midweek game here. And I did like Villa with the matchup just because Brighton plays such a high line, and if you can exploit that high line and kind of invite them in and then counter, then they are very exposed. And when it goes badly, we've seen it goes very, very badly. They've gotten humbled a few times now, record to show to date since the Zerbis came in, but I think Brighton's a good side. They're one of the most entertaining teams to watch. Now, I think people should temper their top 4 discussions, but I think top 7 is still attainable, even with these variants of results here. But I kind of want to talk a little relegation battle here.
Sure, absolutely. And by the way, neither team that we just talked about are relegation battle. So to your point,
just to rotate into the relegation battle, Luton thump Everton, not thump. Okay,
let's not get carried away.
2-1. It felt like a thumping with Luton beating after Everton beats Villa. What happened here?
I mean, I've been on the Everton case all year. You don't know what you're going to get. Sean Dyche gets a big result. You think, okay, this maybe they're right in the ship, and they get a win in the cup, and we've talked about their additions and scoring a few goals. Beto and in particular, maybe they have Calvert-Lewin that could maybe look together, and then they put up a stinker. It's still Everton, Daniel.
I guess so.
It's still Everton. They are in trouble. They have a massive fixture this week against Bournemouth, another kind of 6-pointer like this one was. Sean Dyche needs to win this game. Otherwise, the heat is back on after arguably suppressing some of that heat. But, they go down to Bournemouth and lose there. They're talking. You're looking at Burnley situation. Of course, Burnley hasn't won yet, but you're looking at that kind of conversation, and it's dire times in Merseyside.
What I do to be a fly in the wall in that dressing room after that loss to Luton? I mean, Sean Dyche was probably ranting and raving. It's Luton, lads. What are we doing? But
and on the flip side, credit to Luton, who everyone was talking about.
No
They're
doubt.
going to be the worst team in history. They're going to get less points than Derby County with 11 and 4 points since those conversations came about. So they may not win again, but credit to them for getting a W.
What, they've won before Burnley and Sheffield, right?
Yep.
Because Burnley hasn't gotten a win
Yep,
either.
exactly.
So tough. And as we speak about Burnley, they lose again to Newcastle. I mean, this was with the fixture congestion and Newcastle playing European football. These teams are like prone to drop points at some point, and you see West Ham and you see Newcastle both get good results here. They kind of bounce back. So
yeah, and you mentioned the midweek game, of course, a big one at St. James's Park playing PSG, and so it was an easy game to look over.
Yeah,
but they do get that W, and then another team, Daniel, that is just having a really tough time at the bottom here is Sheffield United. They give up 2 goals, and that's 10 goals conceded in 2 games.
That's an outlier.
That hurts.
Right?
It hurts.
Because you give up 8.
Yeah, I know, but you still give up 8, but it still counts, and that's a tough situation. Of course, there are teams that in other leagues. Of course, we went through the top to bottom in the Premier League, so working our way back up to the top of the table in the Bundesliga. Daniel, this is a fun race right now. Of course, we all feel Bayern Munich is more than likely going to win it for the 12th year in a row, but they had a great match against RB Leipzig. RB jumps out to a 2-0 lead in the first half. A couple questionable decisions by the goalkeeper. Manuel Neuer is on his way back, so maybe that tempers some of that, but jumps out to a 2-0 lead, but Bayern fight their way back and get a draw out of this on the road.
Yeah, the Bayern board has just been awful for the last couple of years now, and what I didn't understand is even though Neuer broke his leg last year and he was expected to be back for preseason, it didn't happen. But this guy's been out of football for months now. Why didn't you just keep Jan Sommer for 6 more months and then sell him in January if Neuer was healthy? I mean, Sven Ulreich's a decent keeper, but in the big games, if you want to win titles and compete in the Champions League, why risk it, even in the group stage? So we kind of see, him make a couple blunders here. And, hey, Leipzig stepped up to the occasion here, and it's good to see because some of these teams get results against, bad teams or mid-table teams. And when it comes to Bayern just humbles them. We've seen that for, a decade now?
Yeah.
So It's good to see that they kind of, it hurts that they choked away a 2-0 lead, but and what are you going to do when you have Harry Kane and Leroy Sané
and the lineup that Bayern has?
Yeah.
And to that point, I guess my question for you is who is this a better result for? Of course, RB at home. You mentioned dropping the 2-0 lead. Is that a good result
Leipzig.
for them, or is it still Leipzig, do you think?
I still think, even though you dropped, you were up 2-0, I still think any result against Bayern, if you can win all the rest of your games, other than maybe Bayern Leverkusen, you're good. So as long as you don't lose to Bayern, you at least have a shot at the Bundesliga title here. And so they're going to be kind of upset about it, but I still think it's a good result.
It is a good result. Of course, that the draw leaves them out of the top 4. They currently sit 5th. A team that we've talked about and quite frankly have not been high on, and yet continue to just get results, Daniel, is Borussia Dortmund. They get another result this week. Shaky start, like I said, but they're undefeated. The only team that's undefeated, I think, in the Bundesliga. And Bayern haven't lost or haven't dropped a point besides draw. They had 2 draws, right?
They haven't lost.
So,
Bayern Leverkusen, BVB,
and Bayern.
Yeah.
But they climb up to 4th. Any outside shot for them at this point, given how bad they've played, and yet they're still right there?
I mean, they're a hospital, so if they can get healthy here and kind of get purring, and maybe a early crash out of the Champions League wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to compete in the Bundesliga title here. But yeah, no, it's good to see that they're figuring out answers. I think they're finally over the Jude hole, and Marco Reus. He's old, but he's kind of back in the lineup here, and Terzic is. I was kind of very critical of Terzic a couple weeks ago, and he's kind of shaken up the lineup and dropped Emre Can and started Özcan and Nemecha, and they've looked better. Once Sabitzer's back to health, and I'd love to see Subgia Reina, but they're kind of responding here, and Adeyemi doesn't look like his old self, but Füllkrug...
Coming off an injury, too, though.
Exactly, yeah. Füllkrug is kind of hit the ground running here, and if Sebastian Aller can kind of gain some form, I think they're going to be just fine.
Interesting that we've talked about 3 teams in the Bundesliga, and yet we have not mentioned the leaders of the actual league, Daniel. A team that we're both been very high on, you in particular, Bayer Leverkusen. Shabby ball is fun to watch, my friend.
It's probably the most enjoyable football to watch on the planet right now, in my opinion, other than maybe 2 other teams. So, I mean, I love every single week I watch Bayern Leverkusen, and I mean Boniface, Wirtz, Jonas Hoffman, Xhaka and Palacios midfield duo. It's just so fun to watch, and you got Frimpong and Grimaldo bombing down the flanks. It's a great setup. Xabi Alonso, even with the fixture congestion, is able to rotate and still get results here. And I mean, they drew against Bayern 2 weeks ago,
Yep.
and so they had their big test, and it's going to be, I think, the Leipzig Bayern Leverkusen game could be one of the biggest games of the season here. I don't know when they play, but very attacking brands pressing of football, so I love it. I absolutely love it, and they just keep rolling.
Of course, the big question with Leverkusen, not only from the team's perspective with how they've kind of faltered across the years, but particularly the Xavi question is, does he last the entire season at Leverkusen? There's, of course, all the rumors of him going to potentially fulfill Carlo Ancelotti's position at Real Madrid. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's already been discussed that Ancelotti is going to be taking over the Brazil job. Do you think that he could be there earlier than the summer, or is he last till the summer?
I think 1,000% that he stays and sees out, because I mean, he just signed a long-term contract at Leverkusen. That's obviously not going to pin him down for multiple seasons, but he's off to a hot start, and I don't think he would do Leverkusen like that, especially because I think Leverkusen were not in a good place when he came in, and he kind of brought them back to relevance. They were like not bottom of the table, but close to it.
Pretty bad.
And yeah. It was really bad. And he's kind of, I think he's a very good man manager and has connections with the players. I don't think he would want to ruin that. So now after the season,
different story.
Completely different story. Yeah. But I do not think he'll leave mid-season like a Chelsea coach. Sorry.
Oh, Potter. Or Tuchel.
Graham Potter.
Yeah,
or
either
Tuchel.
one, or anyone that we've hired.
I don't think either of they would leave mid-season to get a better role. I don't think he would do, but money's money. So
money is money. Yeah.
But as Xabi Alonso is an ex-player who I've followed quite a bit, it doesn't seem like he's that type of manager or player. So I don't see that. But as we kind of rotate, fifth. We talked about the top 4 here. BVB is kind of, skyrocketed in our projections here, but we do have a couple teams that are looking good and could still possibly compete for European football. Stuttgart remain
second. They're in second currently.
In second place. Guirassy did not score, but he still has 10 goals in 7 appearances, and Union is not doing good right now, but will they get back on track? It's honestly hard to say. I don't think they will, honestly. And I think who's going to take their place? Wolfsburg. Niko Kovac, ex-Bayern coach. I mean, the strikers there with Patrick Wimmer and co are purring there, and they don't have European football to worry about. So I think they're going to be top 6 for sure.
It does feel we were talking about Stuttgart in second place when we were talking about the
weird.
5th position, but to be fair, they haven't really played anybody up to this point. The only team that they've played is Leipzig, and they lost 5-1.
Yeah.
So, a little bit early. We'll see what happens. They do have Bayer Leverkusen and Bayern Munich back-to-back in December, which will be an interesting time. Of course, that's way far away, but they can continue and they can stay in that second position until they get to there. We'll see what happens, but I don't think they stay that high.
I do want to say Hoffenheim at least looked good against Borussia Dortmund, even though they lost 3-1.
Yeah, they definitely dominated that game, and the result was not fair to them. But
sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And considering where they were last year, so an interesting time in the Bundesliga. A lot of teams up in the air and things moving around. Now, one race, Daniel, that has become separating themselves, and not really much of a race other than for these 2 teams is Serie A. It does look like, La Liga. 3 teams really kind of stepping up and taking away themselves here. Of course, Girona was in the mix. We've talked about them, but they ran up against a real opponent, and Real Madrid put their foot down and said, hey, this is our league still. Nice to see you. good to know you, but you're still a little early in the project for Girona.
Yeah, and I mean, they got an interesting test up ahead against Athletic Bilbao, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, no, I mean Madrid needed a win. They've been kind of, I mean, every time Madrid lose, they're under scrutiny here. That's kind of the standards.
That's the way it is. Yeah,
that's the way it is. But they got 2 wins in a row. One on Wednesday, one on Sunday. No, Saturday. Excuse me.
Yep.
Again, Girona win was a statement. So Jude Bellingham shines at the top, number 10 of the diamond. So it's good to see him on the score sheet once again, because we really waxed lyrical about him the whole time.
And it was important for that to be back in that position, right? Vinny back in the lineup. You take him away from being that number 9. He felt a little out of place.
Yeah.
But like you said, back in the top of the diamond, and great assist, and then a great finish as well. So back to his Superman self.
Absolutely, and I want to talk about Barca. So they do drop points midweek against Mallorca. I mean, they have struggled at times against the low block, and you kind of saw that here. And you even saw that on Saturday, and Lamine Lamal gets put on and puts a good ball in the box, and Sevilla lose to an own goal. Sergio Ramos, ironically,
yeah,
which I kind of love. I do like Sergio Ramos, but pulling for Barca here at this point, I was pretty happy about that. And Barca, Rafinha gets injured on Saturday.
Hamstring injury.
So apparently it's not too serious, but they're going to have to really count on Ferran Torres, a 35-year-old Lewandowski. They're going to have to depend. You saw Lamine Lamal. He's been getting minutes, but Fermin Lopez, right? Or is it Torres? Lopez, I think. I don't know. But he was a guy they got in the summer, and he's 20 years old, and he's going to be leaned on a lot in the next couple of weeks as Frankie and Pedri are getting back to fitness and still out injured.
To me, the big story with Barca is they have the firepower, they have the means, they have the will, and yet for 60 minutes they look like they're just kind of going through the motions. You talked about Liverpool earlier and how they give up an early goal. Barca have been able to get away with that. They haven't given up those early goals, but they still just look like they're not really interested. And then all of a sudden, the 65th minute, or they bring on Lamine, like you mentioned, and they turn it up. And as a fan, it's infuriating a little bit because you'd like to see them go for 90 minutes and what they could do, and really kind of let the engines run and just go for it. So for me, that may catch up to them as they get further into the competitions and Champions League, and they play Real Madrid and bigger teams, but. They can't drop any more points at this point, or they're going to be chasing Real Madrid.
And you lean on youth, so you'll see if pressure makes diamonds. And we saw Gavi give his heart out on the field, and I feel like we haven't really shouted out Gavi too much on this podcast. But I mean, what a player!
Where do you play him? What position do you call him? He plays everything. He plays it all,
and he's a key cog for them. And if Pedri and Frankie get back healthy, I'm not really worried about them. But as we kind of shift, Atletico Madrid kind of bounced back. They had an iffy week last week, as we talked about them, but they had a good comeback win on Sunday against Cadiz, and they were missing Morata through injury, and Joaquin Correa kind of steps right into his place with a brace, and Griezmann looked good, and we're kind of seeing a resurgence with Sal Niguez, so good to see there for Atletico Madrid. I know you're very high on them.
Yeah, and of course they currently sit 4th. They have a game in hand on Girona from the suspended game earlier due to weather. So, that's kind of, we talked about the top 3 in La Liga. It's still going to be that same. I think, don't count out Diego Simeone and his team. They're going to be 2 or 3 points behind with that game in hand, and you know what you're going to get from them.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be an interesting one. We talked about Barca and their struggles, and of course the injuries at Madrid. So we'll see what happens with Atleti, and of course we talked about Girona. I think they're fighting for that 4th position. There's a lot of teams in that battle for 4th. My 4th position was with Real Betis, who've started to turn it on a little bit here, currently in 7th. But there's a really good battle between Girona, Real Sociedad, your 4th pick, which was Atletico Bilbao. So a really interesting dynamic at both the top of La Liga and then kind of in that second tier, the bottom half you can kind of throw aside. But those top 7 teams are pretty good at this point.
Absolutely, and I mean Bilbao had a loss and a draw, and they're kind of injured right now. They're missing Nico Williams, who they rely heavily on, and a red card at midweek kind of doesn't help things there. You gotta be disciplined there. But I do want to shout out Real Sociedad. I honestly like them to finish in that fourth spot more than Bilbao at the moment, but that might be a little bit of reaction. But I mean, I did not expect Tafase Kubo to just be on fire, and they had the veteran Oriasabal. God, I can't say his name. It's so hard with the rolling of the
It's like me with
TH.
Sassuolo.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But they look really, really, really good, and they did miss some key pieces in the summer, but they keep firing, and I'm pretty bullish on them. They are in Champions League, and they look good. They look good. They got a result against Inter, so maybe we're sleeping on them a little bit too much, and they deserve a shout.
Yeah, lots of goals in that team as well. They gave Real Madrid a pretty good battle a couple weeks ago too. So just a team to watch out for. Another team we won't talk too much about just because they're lower on the table is Sevilla. Of course, Barcelona beat them, but keep an eye out for that team. Of course, a perennial team, and Villarreal. A lot of good teams, but really looking at the top 7 of where they sit currently for me as the contenders and just the main storylines for La Liga at this point.
I think they'll be okay. I think Villarreal and Sevilla, even though they're bottom of the table, or not bottom, but like bottom
half,
10, bottom half. Thank you. I think they will end up in the top 10. I just don't think they'll have European football like they do now, and I think the depth and the financial issues there are what's making them struggle.
Totally agree, and I mentioned this earlier a little bit prematurely. Serie A, of course, that title race and what's going on there seems like a 2-team race in Milan, which we've been saying this whole time, Daniel. We thought this race was going to go down to both AC and Inter. Yep. It appears that way. AC Milan catch up this week with 2 wins. One big one against Lazio, who've struggled, but find a way to get a result in Champions League and kind of keep their momentum and their relevance going. But that's kind of my thought. Still at this point is a 2-team race in Serie A. Any thoughts or any different? Of course, there are teams out there like Juventus and Atalanta and Fiorentina, but for me, it feels like it's a 2-team race.
Yeah,
and Napoli, excuse me.
For now, I think the 2 wins. Lazio was a good test after they played a good team in Inter a couple weeks ago and got completely humbled. So that was maybe just an outlier there, and they look good. Pulisic seems like he's back to his best. Leao, as always, looks like the best player in the Serie A, maybe only rival to Osimhen. And Inter do slip up, so Milan, that was right. Billboard material there. We gotta get points here, and it's good to see they are tied. So maybe the next reverse fixture, but even though they're both at the San Siro later on this year, and then maybe results against Napoli, Atalanta, and maybe like a Roma, Fiorentina, to kind of whoever gets the most points out of those big draws is kind of who's going to win that game, and we'll see how they battle with the depth.
Thoughts on top 4? We mentioned it's a 2-team race here. Who finishes out that top 4 for you? I know we did our predictions, but things have changed since then. Still the same, Juventus and Napoli, and not necessarily in that order, but I think that was your pick, and same where?
I'm gonna say Napoli 3rd, and I'm actually gonna say Atalanta 4th.
Brought you on board. Brought you across the table.
Yeah, I mean, we both hate Allegri, and we've made that very known through this last 7 episodes or so. So I think Juve could sneak in there, but I'm gonna believe the Atalanta hype. The only reason I think they maybe don't is because Juve have no other
same with Chelsea, like we talked about earlier,
and they could with depth and the fixture congestion kind of sneak in there. But I mean, they drew Atalanta at the midweek, and that was a good opportunity for them to kind of. So Juve is still in front of Atalanta barely, but I do think Atalanta, with their talent, to Kettler, who was a Milan buy, who kind of flopped a little bit, he's looking back to his best, and they got some guys there. I like Gasperini too as a manager.
Don't sleep on Fiorentina, of course. A rough season last season, but much improved. Currently in 5th. Well, 6th.
Well, I mean, they did get the Europa
They
Conference League
did.
final,
Yeah, Conference League final. So but in the league underperformed last season. So we'll see what happens. But agree with you. I think it's Napoli and Atalanta for me. Although I had Juventus and Atalanta, but I think Napoli showed enough. The hangover, they got through that. Of course, all the interesting talk with Osimhen and everything that's going on there, which if you haven't, we don't have enough time to talk about, but some interesting stuff going on. Of course, he came out, said he loves Napoli and the fans and the city, and so a lot of that could have been like the Ryder Cup, a lot of media driven stuff, but
no.
an interesting dynamic there as well.
Well, he's gone in the summer, if not January,
absolutely,
anyway. So
absolutely.
well, I guess we'll have to revisit that conversation then.
Now, we do this, and we've defined this as the top 4 leagues. Daniel, I think we all define that, and there are some other leagues though that we want to touch on. Of course, you would normally consider France Ligue 1 as part of the top 5, but they've been pretty poor. We've seen that this season. Monaco leads with 14 points through 7 games. It's pretty awful.
Dismal.
Although I do want to pose the question: Is it just poor play, or is it parity amongst the team?
I genuinely think it's parity at this point. I literally, like in our doc, I said, is France the most competitive league out of any of these that we talk about? And I genuinely, of hearts, think it is. I mean, you have the top 6 all within like maybe 4 points of each other. You know, Rennes, PSG, obviously, who's going to end up kind of firing. But I mean, Marseille isn't even in the top 5 right now, and I think they're going to turn it around. So it could be a sneaky good year for Ligue 1. And do I think Monaco's going to keep this lead? They do play Rennes this Saturday, I think, and that'll really indicate if they're going to be legit in this title push.
PSG, of course, sitting in 5th place right now.
They drew too.
They did draw another draw. That's 3 draws.
Clermont too.
Yeah, Clermont. That's a terrible draw.
Mbappe started, which is the worst thing.
He did. So we talked about that injury last time. It looks like it's okay. Of course, they have a big game against Newcastle, and at St. James's Park. Champions League, could have been looking forward to that one.
Yeah,
but you would have expected
probably
them to win that match regardless. But 5th, and the bigger question now, I think, from PSG's perspective, of course, you mentioned they'll probably get going and probably win the league at some point. Does Mbappe stay after this? I mean, that was kind of one of his things, was like, I want them to perform, I want to play better, I want to win things, and they kind of tempered the expectations, got him to calm down a little bit, but this performance right now, is this enough to keep him for next year?
I don't think so, and I think the point of building this legitimate squad that they did this year was not only to make Kylian happy, but it was, look, Mbappe is gone next year, and this star-studded, top-heavy team that we keep building year after year keeps crashing out. We need to build a complementary squad here, and they've done that this year. They actually done that. Luis Enrique is a great coach, and I think he'll do better without Mbappe there, honestly. So I think they're going to cash in on Mbappe. He signed that deal just so. Yeah, I think he loves PSG in Paris, and I think he wanted them not to get screwed in a deal off of free. So I think that's literally the only reason, because Madrid is going to have to fork up 200 million plus for him. So I mean, but I do like how PSG have built. I like their manager, but I do want to rotate to Portugal. So Sporting do sit top as we speak. And Benfica had a huge game against Porto on Friday. A common theme here, a great game ruined by a really, really, really bad red card. And, I mean, I can argue all day that Liverpool's red cards were bad, but, I mean, this red card given to Cardoso was one of the most corrupt, absurd red cards I think I've ever seen. It was all ball. It wasn't even a foul.
You did text me this. I didn't get to see it yet. I'll take your word for it as someone who's been preaching corruption and upsetness about red cards, so I'll take your word for it.
It's a touchy subject.
It is a touchy subject. Sporting, of course, like you mentioned, sit top. I think that's kind of pretty standard for the Portuguese league, with Benfica and Porto right there as well. Another team that sits atop and pretty much has been a mainstay the last couple of seasons is PSV in the Eredivisie. Mm-hmm. That's not the story. Again, the second week in a row, Daniel, the story for me in the Eredivisie is Ajax and the situation there. Abandoned again for the opposing keeper getting hit in the head by a bottle. What can the Eredivisie do at this point? I mean, do you play behind closed doors with no fans? Or
sure.
It's an interesting time in Amsterdam right now. It's an interesting one.
5 years ago, I'd probably say no, but with COVID and then playing behind closed doors, I genuinely think that could be a possibility here. And I did see when I was at Sevilla, a match against Bilbao, they sectioned off and screened off the away fans, like literally in the stadium with a panel. And maybe that you just kind of panel off the entire stadium. It's a sad thing to have to even reality. I know England gets a lot of stick for their hooliganism, but it seems like the worst is the Dutch league at this point, and it's a sad thing. Ajax was actually winning, so that's another match abandoned. They have to resume later on, but I do want to talk about PSV for a second. Malik Tillman looked fantastic, had a fantastic assist, and Pepe has looked good, and they're second fiddle to some guys like Luke de Jong and Veerman and all those guys, and they look really good, and I think they're going to win pretty comfortably, but I think the only team that will rival them is AZ Alkmaar.
AZ Alkmaar been around as well, European League and some games there as well. But Daniel, there was a lot of action this week. We touched on it and covered a lot of it. Where do we go? Where do we cover? What do we focus on? We'd love to hear from you guys and the fans if there are areas that you want us to pay attention to. Of course, we do primarily focus on the top 5 leagues. If there are storylines that we're missing, please let us know. Of course, you can follow us on X at Full-Time Roundup. Join the conversation there. Also, please download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating. I know we're both empty, Daniel. Of course, we'll have another segment here after the break where we cover our best 11 as well as your bets. I know you had another good week this week, so we'll grab a beer and we'll be right back, and we'll see you on the other side of the break. And we're back. Sitting out here on the patio. Gorgeous night here in Charlotte. Notice company store, Daniel. I got the same beer. You got the same beer. Cheers to you.
Fall in North Carolina is undefeated, especially the start of fall,
undefeated.
You do get some 80s. Still remind you that summer is good, but then you get some like nice 70s, 60s of just the cool breeze.
Those morning runs in the 50s are just perfect. We covered a lot, Daniel, in the game segment, last segment. Of course, there's some amazing individual performances that go along with those games. And we want to cover those. We do this every week. We put together our best 11 of those performances and, highlight who stole the show, essentially. Walk us through our starting 11. Again, we do this together. We'd love to hear your guys' input on Twitter, on my Twitter, your Twitter, the show Twitter. So walk us through the starting 11 that we put together this week.
So first, goalie, we got Alisson from Liverpool. I mean, look, he did concede 2, and 1 was an own goal. Nothing really he could do, but I mean, some of those saves that he had were like saves of the season. He had one outstretched, like upper 90 save that was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. So I got to give him props for that. He basically kept us in this game down a man the entire time, down 2 men at some point. So got to give him a props for that. And for our first defender, we have Alex Grimaldo. He came over from Benfica, and he scores another free kick wonder goal. And I mean, that's the second time, and teams are going to really have to be careful about giving up any free kicks to Leverkusen on top of the box, because he's, with that beautiful left foot of his, it's almost automatic. Our second is Lukeba, Leipzig, center back. He came from Lyon. Lyon are struggling now. Shows how big, only 20 years old, French talent, and it shows how big he is, because Lyon are conceding goals left and right now, and Leipzig have been pretty staunch at the back so far. And then we have Cardona. He scored the game winner, I believe, for Cadiz against Celta Vigo, 95th minute thriller there. So would you top us off for our midfield and forward combination?
I mean, what else can you say about Superman, Jude Bellingham? Goal, assist, we alluded to it earlier. Fantastic assist in that match. Martin Odegaard, who we both are very high on. I had him as my player of the year for the Premier League. A goal and assist as well for him. Alcahochi and Monaco, 2 goals and assists.
Years old.
21. 2 goals and assist there. And then, of course, this afternoon, Nico Gonzalez for Fiorentina with the game. Well, not the game winner. One of the 3 goals that they had.
He's
one was fantastic. One was an own goal. So 1 goal there. Up front, Suarez from Almeria, 3 goals.
Not that Luis
Suarez. Thankfully, the biting is over. Almeria with 3 goals. Correa for Atletico Madrid with 2 goals, of course. And then Orsolini,
Bologna.
Hattie.
Big Hattie.
How can you leave a Hattie off the list
Hatchet
here?
man.
So, of course, we try and give you some of the off the radar guys, and again the guys
like
that
to mix it
highlighted.
up.
We like to mix it up. So that was our starting 11. Daniel, player of the week for you. Anyone that stood out in particular?
I mean, Ollie Watkins. There was rumors about him going to a bigger club, but the goals just haven't been there this year. He scored his first goal last week, and he has been instrumental in how Villa has played, but just hasn't. He's gotten an assist, but it just hasn't showed up on the goal sheet, and he decided to drop 3 goals and assists against a good Brighton. So he deserves the shout. I know that it's been probably pimped up for a while, and I'm just happy for him as a player. He kind of worked his way up through the English leagues, and he found himself on Villa. Big move from a championship side. So I'm always happy when you work so hard, you believe in yourself, you believe in your dream, and you're kind of just conquering it.
Big goal against Chelsea a couple weeks ago too, and got him off the mark. For me, Lautaro Martinez, 4 goals. Daniel off the bench as a sub.
How many minutes?
Not many,
Probably
but he got
30.
all 4. I think it's his history. What he did. Of course, I had him as my golden boot winner for Serie A, so that helps me, of course, with the 4 there. For me, young player of the week, as we always do, we want to highlight some of those. I did have Dybala. I did. No. I had him as player of the year. I had golden boot winner was Lautaro Martinez. That's fair. Young player of the week, we try to highlight some of the youngsters that are coming up. For me, Lamine Yamal, we've mentioned this before. It's not always about the stats. I just think this kid has something special. He comes on, makes a difference. He did get, of course, the situation that led to the own goal and the winner for Barcelona, and
fearless.
Just an absolute stud. And for me, I'll keep him kind of penciled in until someone proves me different each week.
No, you have every right to. And then for me, I have Hassan Diao. If you follow my Twitter, I retweet it from Football One. The kids will give him credit, but they kind of reached. They shouted him out a couple weeks ago as Betis have some injury troubles, and he's 18 years old. He stepped right into the limelight. He had a goal this week, and he had a goal last week. I mean, 18 years old, and you get your first start, and you score. You get another start, and you score again. I mean, that deserves to be a young player of the week here. And, I mean, I think this is a pretty solid list we have.
Yeah, pretty solid. And, of course, again, let us know what you're thinking. If we missed anybody in particular or anyone stood out to you, you can follow us at Full-Time Roundup and chime in on the conversation there. We're always looking to engage with you guys and hear who you think. Again, if we miss anybody, we can only cover so much soccer, so we're looking for the fans to let us know too. But Daniel, it is time for you to tell the people what they need to bet on. We talked about the upfront. There are Champions League games that we'll touch on here as well as part of our bets, or your bets, excuse me. I do not participate here. But first, we have to recap what happened this week. I know it was a little bit of a challenge, a little bit of a tough week. But walk us through your best bets, and as well as your bets for this week coming up.
Boys, we're always due for. You can't win every weekend, right? And this was one of those weeks, and it wasn't in horrific fashion, but I did go big on Liverpool here, and my mortal lock was Liverpool Spurs over 3.5, and you get a goal taken off by PJMLO. You have 2 red cards, not just 1 but 2. What are you gonna do? What are you going to do here? So that's on me, guys, left hand up. But I mean, you could see it. You could see it in the game that there was always goals if what happened with the referees didn't happen. So just stick with me. Parlay was an L. A weird week with fixture congestion. Not making excuses. I'll be better. And I've actually changed my strategy. So you're going to see here in a bit. Straight bets, Stuttgart Cone over 3 did not hit. I mean, there was goals galore here, and Girassi and Undav missed a couple sitters, which hurt to even get the push here. But Leverkusen Mainz push, that also hurt because I could have used a win there. Monaco Marseille flew over. That was an easy game. Bayern Leipzig, bonus bet on the pod. If you see, I give you a couple different bets. I always change up one bet when I post on Twitter just to coerce people to listen to the pod here. So that was the bonus bet. That was a no sweat winner. And then Liverpool moneyline, obviously, with the current events there. That was a tough loss, but it's okay. Now, we're still up 16 units all time. I mean, guys, I can't win 8 units every week here, but, 16 units in 5 weeks is phenomenal. So stick with me here. So for UCL, we got an interesting parlay here, an interesting parlay that I love. So we got Bayern Munich against Copenhagen, Liverpool versus is it Union? I can't remember their name. It's like the USG Berlin squad we played last week. Barcelona, almost even favorites against Porto, and then Lazio plus 0.25. Grab plus a half if it's there. For me, it was only showing plus 2.5, which is a Chinese spread, is what they call it, which means you get half of your losses back. It does not apply for the parlay, but if you remember, Celtic had 2 red cards last game. They're missing a ton of guys. I love Lazio get right game here, so that is plus 500, 5-1 odds there. Love it. For my mortal lock, this is where we only risk 1 unit on the parlay. We risk 3 units here on the mortal. This is Liverpool over 3.5. Look, Jota red card, Curtis Jones red card, and we're at Anfield. You know what that means? That means we're starting the big dogs today because we usually rotate, but since guys are missing Premier League action, that means they're going to start midweek. We are going to kill Union State, USG. And so over 3.5, we might score that ourselves. So that's an absolute hammer play there. For best bets, we have Brian Marseille over 3. Brian has not gone under once this year in 7 attempts, not one. And I think Marseille's in a great spot to kind of rally here. They piss goals just like Brighton do. And I think this is an easy over 3, if not over 5. Man U versus Galatasaray over 3. Currently, Manchester United's a hospital. Galatasaray has Dries Mertens, Wilfried Zaha, Icardi. They have all the guys. I think that's a perfect matchup for them to kind of go get a result here. So I love over 3. And last but not least, Ajax in Athens. Ajax is at the back is just suspect. We saw Athens were pretty deadly against Brighton on the counter. I love that going over 3. And then we have domestic picks. We have a parlay here. Spurs moneyline against Luton. Girona against Cadiz. Almost even favorites, which is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in the world. And then I'm going to stick with Matt's Chelsea versus Burnley minus 135. I took a long look in the mirror after taking Chelsea and how they played. Nico Jackson's back. I do think that Burnley is that bad, and we'll see if they get 3 points. I mean, they've rattled off 2 wins here. I think they'll get a third.
That's a loss now.
Hey, you're the cooler, not me. And then my mortal lock, we're going to go back to the well. This might be the biggest of all plays of all time. Liverpool, Brighton over 3.5. This is the easiest money I have ever seen. I mean, this line should be 4 at least. Brighton play a very high line, and if you think Villa putting 6 was bad against Brighton, I think Liverpool annihilates Brighton here, and they get a few too at the end, a little garbage time goal, if you will. And then I have for my best bets, Liverpool money line, basically even odds, which is the dumbest thing I think I've ever seen here. They're going to be angry after that last result. Wolfsburg, Stuttgart over 3. Stuttgart, they've been great with the over, so is Wolfsburg. I think that match is kind of back and forth, instant classic Bundesliga match. Over 3 in Monaco Reims. Monaco has just been one of my favorite teams to bet on, and they're not going to stop until they do me dirty. So I love Monaco Reims. Both teams love scoring goals, and Monaco loves to concede. And then over 3, probably the match of the weekend, if you can correct me on this, but Arsenal City, I think this match flies over because I do think Arsenal score a few here, and they actually might win this straight out. So just keep that in mind if you're looking at odds. I think Arsenal is an easy sprinkle there.
Well, you heard it here, folks. Lots of action, of course. Midweek, Champions League, Europa League, and then domestic leagues. Daniel here puts all of his bets on our Twitter page as well. You can follow us again at Full-Time Roundup. You can also follow us on our individual pages. Daniel's is Liverpool CLT FC. Mine is Life of Gesslin. Of course, you can always download the show, give us a listen, give us a rating, a 5-star rating, wherever you get your podcast. Daniel, it's always a pleasure. There's so much going on here. Again, midweek, weekend, it feels like it never ends, but always a pleasure to see you, always a pleasure to catch up, and we'll see you guys in the next roundup.